Now, 3 days, hundreds of conversations, and a room full of people doing some of the most consequential work in the world. Now, before we close, we want you to sit, have a wonderful time. We're going to have and we're going to hear and learn together, all together, what we've done this week. And we're going to bring them all into one colossal body before we leave here. And to help us do that is our final panel section or panel discussion for this conference. And helping us with this discussion, which I know is a combination of it all for us before we get back home. Serving as the anchor or the moderator for this section, which is going to have a reflection on what we have learned or what have been learned over these past days. The Deputy Head of Public Sector at Access Partnership is going to be our moderator for this session. So ladies and gentlemen, help me bring on stage. Now, this is the final one. So if you've never clapped from day one till now, what are you doing with your hands? And if you've never shouted from day one till now, what are you doing with your voice? Leave everything here and go have a new one in your home. So ladies and gentlemen, if your hands are not busy and your voice is yours, help me bring on stage our moderator. By this time, you start clapping. Our moderator, no other person than Alana Welch to lead her. That is it. That's the spirit. Now, those joining us online, just start giving us the emojis because we can't hear you, but we can see when you're giving it to us. Joining her on stage, ladies and gentlemen, is the founder of MERL Tech Initiative. Let's bring on stage Linda Rooftree. Right. I'm not feeling the energy in the house. Joining us on stage for this final one, ladies and gentlemen, is the Global Data and Analytics at Catholic Relief Service. Ladies and gentlemen, you start clapping now. Let's bring on stage Eric Ingweri. Woo. Joining us on stage again, ladies and gentlemen, the gentleman who by the time he gets back home will receive a new appointment letter. It's no other person than the Global Senior Manager of ICT at SOS Children's Village, Ahmed Mohammed. And ladies and gentlemen, joining us on stage again, is it the final one? Final one to join us on stage, ladies and gentlemen, the Associate Products and Services Person from DIAL, D-I-A-L. Ladies and gentlemen, help me bring on stage Mark Mulumbi. All right, Alana, your panelist. Panelists, your moderator.
That's a lot of energy we have to follow. So we have to keep it up. It's end of the last day. We actually have more people in the audience than we thought we were going to. So thanks for showing up and not, running to go pack your bags just yet. So the purpose of this last panel is really to help us close out this conference. We spent 3 days together. We've learned a lot. So we're going to talk about, what we've heard, what themes we heard emerge within the rooms, what discussions were had, and what can we carry with us as we go back to our work, to our countries, to our team members and colleagues, and what are we going to take from these rooms and bring into the future until we all get to meet again. So I'm going to ask for brief introductions from the panel because we've got a lot to discuss. So Linda, can you just tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your organization?
Sure. So I lead the Merle Tech Initiative, which does monitoring, evaluation, research, and learning at the intersection of technology. So we look at Merle of technology and technology used for Merle with a strong focus on responsibility and ethics.
Thank you. And I'm going to actually flip around. Mark, would you like to go next?
Oh, yeah. Karibu Nairobi. Mark Mlobi here from Digital Impact Alliance. We are an NGO based in the US. We work with governments on the intersections of good DPI and data exchange. Thank you.
Awesome. Eric.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Ngwiri. I'm the Global Director for Data Analytics at CRS, which needs no introduction. My job is to help the agency and people in the agency to use data to inform decisions.
Thank you. And Ahmed.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for surviving until this last moment of the conference. I thought the room will be much emptier. My name is Ahmed Mihamid. I work for SOS Children's Villages. In my organization, we're a global organization that works with children, young people, and communities in providing them different care, education, and development services and protection.
Thanks. And I was remiss in not introducing myself. So my name is Alana Welch. I am the Deputy Head of Public Sector Advisory at Access Partnership. And we really support clients, governments, and multilaterals at the nexus of technology policy and digital transformation. So I'm really excited to be with you all here today. So I want to open up with Linda. A core aspect of your work is learning and helping this sector to evolve. You've been doing this for many years. I've known you for almost a decade now. And so I would love to start this conversation with your insights, what you've seen and heard this week, how that relates to the conversations we've had going on up until this point, and what you're taking away from this week.
Sure, and I think my favorite part of the MERL acronym is actually the learning. And so we've been in this space since 2014, and we started off when people were first asking, could we collect data on a tablet? Could we collect digital data? Could we use participatory digital mapping? And so we've, crowdsourcing. And so a lot of things have changed. It's kind of amazing to think 12 years later, we've got AI, generative AI, which is so different from what we were doing, 12 years ago. And so there's a lot that has changed, but the more things change, the more things stay the same. And so I think when a lot of the topics that we're hearing coming through in a lot of the panels and the discussions have been around things that we know already. So importance of involving community and co-designing with communities and making sure that we're protecting data. Responsible data and data protection is not something that our sector is just learning about. We've been thinking about this, for probably about 10 years. The GDPR came out about 10 years ago, and so we've been thinking about this for quite some time, and our organizations are evolving. And so I was hearing a lot more mention at this conference around data responsibility, data protection, even people asking about data governance, and then moving that into AI governance, and how does responsible data and AI intermix, and what about co-design? And so I think that's really great to see these themes really hitting the main stage, whereas before we felt like we were just please listen to us, please listen to us. And I do want to mention that this responsible data work is really building on a lot of work that feminist organizations, that African women have been doing for years and years, thinking about all these topics. And so I think it's really important to recognize that. And then one last thing I'll say, actually, no, I'm going to save that for the next one. I'll be quiet now, and I'll hand back over to you.
Okay, and I encourage them as well to feel free to jump in and respond to one another. So guys, please don't be shy. But Ahmed, turning to you next. So your work at SOS is really focused around children and young people, and I'm really curious for your insights on how you have seen young people and the youth incorporated into the discussions you've heard this week, and any other broader insights that you've taken away.
Thank you very much. I think my first reflection was when I saw the agenda of the conference that that's an AI avalanche because AI was present everywhere. But over the past 3 days, I think we managed to touch points across different things in there beside the AI and how we are utilizing it in there. Let me start from the first part about the young people. I think the journey in terms of incorporating young people into the conversation about digital is still a long journey. We have seen, we had the pleasure of joining some young people in the conference sessions in there, where we could have seen that we should not be busy by more or less creating solution for young people, but rather making sure that the young people and communities as well, they are part of the drivers of that one. Nevertheless, as also part of the overall things in there, we discussed several times different topics like data, like the use of AI and so on. And I was just like, well, it's a moment for organizations to reflect on the digital maturity that's required to properly utilize all these different solutions. Do we have the right skilled people to be able to make the right utilization of the technology, along with the rest of the machine that is supporting those digital solutions? A simple example for me is the data that is being collected. We've heard loads of data collection, but I would just like, from a pure IT perspective, how are we doing in terms of data security? We are the custodian of very sensitive and critical data in there. This is part also of the digital maturity journey that we have to look into as organizations to make sure whatsoever the technology that's evolving to us, we are ready to bring the impact of that one.
Thank you. Mark, I'm coming to you next. Bringing some great energy up on the stage at the end. Although I did see when you were dancing, you sat back down, so might have to correct that later. But I'd love to hear what you picked up this week and a lot of the conversations you've been having. Dial works very closely with governments. And so what are some of the themes you heard emerging and hearing in the rooms?
Right off from the agenda, when Carl was opening the conference, he noted AI really emerged very strong. And we also saw geospatial data really coming in strong. And I really want to acknowledge that it was very very prominent in the conference. And some of the works that we also see ourselves do, the work that we are doing with Sierra Leone, some work we are doing in Nairobi here, really we are seeing a geospatial data conversation has really matured. We are talking about it, we are engaging about it. And then when I look at on the other side of AI, some very good conversations happened last year in Kigali. We had an AI Africa consensus. We have an Africa AI Council. And we have some working groups. I'm seeing some of the members here from the working groups, various working groups that we are doing. And these conversations are really communicating that we really need to collaborate more. And that has come out very clear in all these sessions that I attended around AI. All the conversations that we talked about geospatial, the good partners that we are seeing on the panel, on the audience here, really came out strong, and I took those two. I'll remain with one as Linda for the next round.
Yeah. All right. Well, then, Eric, coming to you to round us out, just your top takeaways. What are you walking away with this week?
Yeah, so I have been involved with the ICT4D Conference, I think, for the last, since it started, more or less. And I remember the conversations we used to have then were about how do we collect offline data? That was actually the biggest problem that we had back then. So reflecting back on those many years ago, being involved in building out data collection systems for offline use, to now when we have a recognition not just of the potential for technology, but actually the need to put in significant effort in making sure we have good data. So the data governance is a core central part of this conversation. I'm really happy and glad that it's being taking center stage. And the reason why it's taking center stage is because the more we make insights available, the more we are able to see how bad that our underlying data is. So the focus on making sure that our data is strong and that we are collecting the right information, that we are being responsible. I liked that we had a lot more focus on those conversations. I also liked, and I was speaking to someone earlier today, that there's been a lot more practical conversations in this conference around the challenges around implementation of ICT4D, the realities that we have to face, and just coming together to think about solutions, which I think is very unique for this community as practitioners, and I think we want to continue to do that as much as possible.
Yeah, that's great. I really appreciated the really positive insights you all have shared. I know that in our advanced discussion before this panel, we also talked about some of the challenges that we were hearing, or maybe some of the negative sides of the work that we do that don't always get brought up in a more public forum. And so I do want to turn to those topics now, because I think the sticky topics are actually really some of the most critical ones for us to have. Eric, you raised at the table today, and I'd like us to talk about this as well, the challenge around funding. So not only are we in a new funding environment, but because of that, where the money comes from has shifted, and by necessity that sometimes means that the priorities in the work have shifted, or the demands have shifted as well. Would you like to share kind of your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think that we need to have real conversations about, I'm a big proponent of what we call a system of incentives. And when we have conversations about technology and the use of technology, it's always great to talk about digital rights and all these very, really noble things, and especially about who we present and what that data represents. But the reality is we live in an environment where we have to seek funding. And the other reality is a lot of the people that do wield the power and the influence and the money will influence what we think about and what we do. And we have a responsibility to always push back, but we also have to recognize that and actually speak about it. The fact that we have philanthropy organizations, corporate organizations getting more involved and actually demanding and setting the agenda for what kind of programs we do, what kind of information we bring out, what kind of insights we develop, that's an important conversation. And we need to really challenge ourselves in saying, with this new reality where we don't have as much flexibility, what does that mean for the work that we do? How do we make sure that we maintain our responsibility and our ethos around the work that we do, but also recognizing that, you know, it's a world that it's a give and take. And there are many things I can say about, but I think that's important as a conversation that I felt that was missing a little bit from all the things that we talked about.
Yeah, and on that topic around, you know, what did we think was missing? ICT4D is such an important platform for us all to come together, but we do have a limited amount of time to spend together. And so by necessity, that means sometimes some topics are dropped off the agenda, or we don't quite get the time to get to that. And so I would love for each of you, if you have in mind, ideas around what might have been missing, but you want people to think about as they're leaving as well, or where you think we could have spent more time and gone deeper into a particular topic. You know, what do you want people to really be keying into as well as they're walking out the door at the end of the day? Mark, would you like to go?
I knew you will point out to me. Interoperability. I think if we did a word cloud during this conference, that word would really come out strong. And I feel we need to have very deeply honest conversation. We know how to do good systems. We have frameworks. We have all the playbooks. If right now, I think everyone is doing frameworks and playbooks right now. But really, the political will to honestly share data, I think that's a conversation that we need to dig deeper. And I've seen that, of course, we are seeing within the audience, within the conferences that the events that we had, it came out strong. People were saying that it's good to share, but I think we need some more work on that area. We've spoke about this for the longest time, even before I joined the workforce. So, yeah, it's good to really engage in that honest conversation on interoperability.
Thank you. And Ahmed, I know that you have...
Yeah, let me pick from you. One of the things that came into my mind during one of the sessions, it was speaking about the role of the partnerships. And how do we make sure that we are managing this complex spectrum of the humanitarian and development world by making sure that we are doing proper and meaningful partnership which engage the nonprofit sector, the corporates, the government, and so on. Because it's clear there is no NGO which is alone is able to manage the overall complexity that we are having in there. And the thing is, from this partnership is we will get out from the box of doing so many pilots but not being able to scale up those pilots based on the evidence that we had. I think in every organization, every year there are loads of pilot projects, but we never came into kind of one solid, scalable approach if we do not put our efforts all collectively together.
And I think kind of picking up on sustainability, one thing that I think I would have liked to see more of is kind of thinking in the future. We haven't really talked very much about things like compute or things like data centers. Where are these data centers going to be built? I think it's something like 71 or 74% of the population in the US from some surveys is now pushing back against data centers. They don't want data centers built in the US. So where are they going to be built? And who's going to suffer the consequences of the energy and the water use from data centers that are being built? And whose governments are asking for those data centers to come in. We heard when we were talking earlier that some African governments are asking for data centers. And so I'm wondering about some of the tensions. If we think about, AI can help us resolve climate issues, but AI contributes to climate issues. AI contributes to democracy issues, but it also maybe can help us with democracy. So what are these big tensions that we see around specifically generative AI? If generative AI harms women because of gender bias or it exacerbates tech-facilitated gender-based violence, but we also want to use AI to include women. So really, I feel like some of these high-level challenges are very, very linked into all of the practical work that we've been talking about this week, and I would love to see more of that connection between our practical work that we're doing to implement emerging technology tools, especially emerging AI, and how are we thinking about or supporting communities or supporting countries to maybe push back against any of those harmful uses.
Please.
I do want to talk about one other thing that I think stood out. We have not had enough conversations about data as a public good, and more especially about the fact that this data as a public good is disappearing because the support that was going into maintaining systems like DHS and FuseNet and other things, some of it is coming back, some of it is disappearing completely. And that really forces us to have a very relevant conversation around what are the core things that we need to understand as we do our work, and how do we continue to support that? How do we come together and think about what that looks like, what that new future looks like, if the public data sets that we assumed would exist stop existing? And that's a real reality now that we never thought was possible. And I think that's an evolution of a conversation we need to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's a good then segue into thinking about where we go from here. So we are wrapping up 3 days. Everyone's about to scatter to the winds. We get relatively rare opportunities to sit in rooms together and have these conversations, but they're really important for being able to have a sounding board to solve the challenges that we face in our work and get a different perspective. And so I really would love for the audience to hear from you all what your parting thoughts are. So what are the big takeaways that you are leaving this room with? Where do we go from here? And what do you think what do you hope the future will look like when we come back together in 2 years' time, right, Nora? So what do you want to see change between now and when we are all together in these rooms again, based on what you learned this week? And Ahmed, I'll start with you.
Right, thanks for bringing me to the spotlight. I think from this conference we got it clear that the technology, it's no longer the conversation that is blocking, or that's the story. It's for us as organizations, what are we doing to make ourselves more prepared, how we are redesigning ourselves, how we are reskilling our staff, how are we shaping the mindset of our leadership, and how we are redesigning our programs in a way that this technology makes a meaningful impact that eventually the beneficiaries will make use of. So that's for me is my main takeaway of taking it back and then making sure that these different pillars have been addressed and they're ready to adopt all these kind of new changes.
Thanks. Eric, I'll come to you next.
I think that one of the things that I'll take away from this, and it's kind of very philosophical, but we are a very strong, resilient community. And if there's anything I've learned about our ability to come together and to speak through the challenges that we face and the work that we continue to be passionate about, despite all the challenges we've had in the last 2 years, really speaks to the commitment and the passion that we have. I'm excited about the possibilities, and I'm more excited about the fact that we really can continue to leverage the power of very, very fast changing technology for the benefit of the public good. And I'm excited to see what happens in the next 2 years when we've built out this exciting new things, new tools. We've seen a lot of great exhibitors today. If you had a chance to go downstairs and sort of look at all the work that's being done there, it's amazing. And so I'm very optimistic about what new things what problems we can solve with this and how we can continue to work together to build that out.
Great. Mark, I'm coming to you next.
I had this one written for you. The African digital consensus is real, geospatial infrastructure conversation is maturing, and there's a generation of implementers in this room who are not waiting for permission. It's very punchy. Yeah.
It's very punchy. That's the quote for the website. And Linda, I started with you. I'm going to finish with you. Please, can you share your insights and what you're taking away?
Yeah, I mean, I think I loved all the conversations. I learned so much from everyone. It was really inspiring and energizing to be here. And I love that there were a lot of conversations around data sovereignty and AI sovereignty and African language models. And I'm really, really hoping when I come back, if I come back in a couple of years, I would love to see actual, kind of like decentralization of big tech power, and I would love to see some small language models. I would love to see examples of African language models underlying a lot of the tools that people are using. I think that would be so cool to kind of decentralize some of the power from above, but re-centralize it in some shared projects that are really exploring some of the potential and possibilities of small language models and African language models in community.
I love that vision for the future. So thank you all so much for hanging with us and for sticking through to the final panel. Thank you to the panelists. Please, if everyone can give them all a hand one last time.